Well, welcome to another episode of Our Uncommon Life. I am Vena Bodie,
And I am Zach Bodie.
and we are happy to have you again here this week on YouTube watching us. Aren't you guys so lucky?
Yeah, I feel like I'm being like, I don't know. It's definitely different knowing that I'm on camera.
Yes.
Because there's like I use a lot of hand gestures and I also like look at Vena a lot. And so like I'm looking at her right now, but then I have to remember to like look back at the camera.
Yeah,
So
it's definitely interesting. I feel like because Zach uses so many hand gestures, I need to up my hand gesture game. So,
I feel like it's more interesting to watch when you're like animated, you know?
yeah, it is, but
I
I
don't want
don't
to be
know.
just like a talking head.
What? You don't want to stand still and do that? I also feel like I'm completely losing my voice. So bear with me on
Oh,
that. I was in Traverse City this weekend with my sister, my cousins, and my best friend
mhm.
of 30 years. And it was very frigid and snowy and
Yeah.
cold. And so I think it has taken my voice completely away. So
Well, hopefully you're not getting sick, but
no, I think it's just literally the cold took the voice. So now I'll just sound all raspy all episode.
it's like
So
Phoebe and her sexy
oh
voice
yeah,
one.
and her sexy voice one, or I could go like Roz from Monsters Inc. Like
Oh yeah, that's a great one.
Wachowski.
Did you file your paperwork?
So alas, here we are. So Zach, what are we talking about today?
So I think that today I really kind of want to talk about where we started, where we are now, and kind of stuff we're working on in the future. Um, because like it's such a weird time right now. Um, just everything going on, whether it's the social climate, the economic climate, the political climate, like it's
Hmm.
all just so crazy right now. And it's easy to lose focus on where we are today and what we're trying to accomplish. And so I feel like it's a really good time to kind of recap like and reevaluate where we started and where we are now and keeping our eyes on moving forward. So I just thought it'd be a kind of cool conversation.
Yeah, I think when we were talking about doing this episode, we were kind of talking about like, there's a lot of people out there that are just trying to get by
Yeah.
and which I mean, yeah, it's tough out there. It's like $1 bajillion for a thing of eggs nowadays. So
Right.
um and then us coming in and we're talking about our vacations and our place up north, and sometimes it's really easy to be like, well, I'm just trying to get by. And so I just wanted to kind of like touch, like when we were talking about this, I just wanted to kind of touch in on the fact, like, where in our lives have we just been trying to get by? How, where we're at now, um, we might not be just trying to get by, but that doesn't mean that we haven't ever been in that spot. And
Yeah.
so you can't sometimes compare where you're at in your journey to where somebody else is at in a different part of the journey. So does
Yeah.
that make sense? Is that
Yeah, it makes complete sense to me. Actually, I think that's the important component there is comparison
right?
because we see a lot of comparison. I mean, we've even talked about it on one of the episodes of like, looking at the amount of listeners and followers and viewers that we have is like a drop in the bucket compared to what we have seen from like some major people. But that's not why we do it. We don't do this just to get likes and follows and just show off or whatever. This is just like we're trying to bring value to some people. And if you're one of those people, that's awesome. Like we're super pumped about that. But we don't need 10 million listeners a day.
Yeah, and I love that you use that as the example because it also shows that everybody has to have a starting point, right? Like, yeah, we I think last week's episode got like 15 views on YouTube so far after a couple days, so
I,
I'm happy with that. But like, I mean, you look at somebody else that's got like 100 million views,
yeah.
but everybody is at different points in their journey, and so I think that is what we wanted to touch base on today.
Yeah.
So.
So why don't you start by giving us a quick synopsis of like your life in a nutshell and like
I'm in a nutshell. Sorry, that's
uh,
the Austin Powers reference.
I,
Look at me in a nutshell.
I wish I was familiar with that. I thought you were just being weird.
No, I'm in a nutshell. So, sorry. So yeah, my life in a nutshell, literally. Um, I mean, Growing up, we never had a lot of money.
Mhm.
I grew up in a really kind of like harder area here in Metro Detroit up until I was like in fifth grade or so. Then my family, we moved to Kentucky and not an expensive part of town or anything. And then we moved back to another kind of not so high end town. There was points in time where my family had to um, use food stamps because my dad had gotten hurt, and there was a point in time where my family had to go to like a food bank. Um,
I didn't know that.
yeah,
Oh, wow.
yeah, my dad got hurt, and I think this is kind of funny because I think uh, the person that hurt him watches our podcast sometimes. So, Jeremy, you know the story, and we love you. But at a church picnic, they were playing football, and
Oh, man.
my dad's knee went out, and so my mom worked, but she just worked part-time, so my dad was completely out of work, and so we had like no money. We lived in a little apartment, and me and my sister split a room.
Mm.
I slept on a twin pull-out bed for a lot of my life. So like we used to split, me and my sister used to split junior Whopper meals at Burger King, but we always had a lot of fun. We never like felt that, like yeah, I might not have had the like same clothes as other kids, but like we always had a really fun household, and we always there was always food even if my parents had to get the food stamps. Like we were always provided for. Then as I got older, things got better at home, but then, in and out of some bad relationships. I was married. I got divorced after 3 months. So, um,
And I'm back now.
shut up. So, I went through a bankruptcy because of said divorce. And then right out of that, I got into another really horrible relationship where I was being used for the money I didn't even have. So, there's a lot of points in my life where I felt like I could have stayed content. I could have just lived in it and just been like, well, this marriage is bad. I have a bad marriage. He isn't what I want, or this isn't going well. I mean, it wasn't going well at all, obviously, which was why, thus the 3 months. So, but I just kind of was like, no, I don't think this is it. I don't want to live my life this way forever. And it was like I could see the future, and I was like, this is going to be the rest of my life if I stay in this. And then even with the bankruptcy, like there's a lot of people that file two, three, four, five bankruptcies, and that's okay if you have to do that. I did that, and I chose to take the bankruptcy courses and start making sure I save money. I don't even think I got a credit card for about 5 years. And the first credit card I got after that was like when I had to pay the money myself.
Mm.
So like I gave like the creditors $300, and that was my limit. And so I used that for years. So I had to like really retrain myself on all of that. And then, that even affected us, looking for houses and trying to get different loans and things. I had to, for like 10 or 12 years, write that, like a letter, like, hi, this is my situation. And I went through
Mhm.
bankruptcy because bankruptcy follows you around for a long time. So, um, but I chose to tell you about all of that when we got first started dating. I shouldn't say got married. And we worked through that together. Like we started a savings account right when we started getting married. We knew we didn't want that to follow us around forever. I was honest to myself and to my new partner about that. So I just feel like there's a lot of points in my life where I could have been like, oh, I'm just bad with money, or oh, I I went through a bankruptcy, and like that could have been my story and that's it, right? But I had to push through a lot of things to get where we're at now.
Mhm.
To have a savings account, to be able to travel, to be able to purchase a place like what up north. Like one of my most favorite things ever is back when we first started really saving money, I was really responsible for that. And a lot of that money is like what we use to purchase the place up north, you know? So I just think you can hold on to your story. You can compare your story to somebody else and not really know where their story has weaved and wobbled throughout their life. So, yeah, that's a little bit, that's like a very short synopsis.
That was definitely a short synopsis. I mean,
Yeah. I mean, I could have dug a lot in a lot
you
of that.
condensed a time frame. I almost
Yeah.
said a long time frame, and that would have been rude. But you condensed
Thank you.
a time frame
Yeah.
into a 10-minute segment.
My 20s definitely were 20, like for sure. Like
Yeah,
it was a crazy 10 years. So, but I'm on the other side of it, you know.
yeah,
I choose to um not let those be my story or my identity. I use them as like bookmarkers of like where I've been to be able to look back and have awareness about I did have that and that was a hard point in life and I was really really just trying to get by like in the midst of divorce and a bankruptcy. Like there was times in my life I was just digging in my heels and just trying to get through it, you know. Now is not one of those times.
yeah.
Now is a time that I get to thrive a little bit. And yeah, that's that. Am I rambling?
No, you're fine. I mean, thrive when you can thrive.
Thrive. So let me like ask you like what is like your background a little bit? I know your background, but I don't know if our
Yeah.
listeners ever know that. So tell me a little short synopsis, Zach.
I'm really kind of trying to figure out how deep I want to go here,
Oh,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, um, you started with like where you grew up and that, and I think, I grew up in a very different way, right?
Mhm.
And you grew up like you said you had a lot of fun around the house and played a lot of games, and even though you guys might have been struggling a little more financially
Mhm.
than I did or my family did when I was growing up. I probably still ask the same questions any kid asks, right? Like, so I remember my parents talking about money a lot. And I remember asking, are we poor?
Mm.
And also thinking, even after I was told, no, we're not, but like, I've been thinking, like, we are, like, we must be broke. And I had no clue what food stamps were. I'd never
Yeah.
had to, and I know you've shared this on the podcast before, but I've never had to split a Whopper meal with my siblings. You know what I mean? So, like, it was super different, but I also like don't remember necessarily having a ton of fun and playing a lot of games. Like I remember like we talked about this, like my game nights, like my family trying to create family game night. I was like, "Oh my god.
Yeah.
Like this sounds terrible." Like I wanted to win as fast as I could because I always wanted to win and
What?
get out of there, right? Like I got to go, right? Um, and that's not a shot at my parents or the way I grew up or anything like that. It's just the way I felt for whatever reason, kind of growing up. So it was interesting, kind of growing up that way. And I was moving extremely quickly towards independence. I think by 16, I was like of the mindset that I'm moving out and I'm ready to do my own thing.
Mhm.
Um, which I don't think is unlike most people, but I was pretty adamant about like being super independent. Um, and then I kind of I don't know. I mean, you were always good in school, right?
Yeah.
I was terrible in school by choice. Um, more of seeing what I could get away with. But yeah, I mean, I when I was told no because I didn't have a job or no financially, I usually found a way to get what I wanted, whether it was negotiating,
Mhm.
whether it was creating some kind of like a business, quote unquote, um, to raise the money that I needed. Selling report cards, keeping kids out of trouble. Some of this technology was brand new when I grew up. So, but yeah, it was just finding a way to get stuff done, and so that's kind of where my background comes from. So being told no is kind of inherently built into me, where I'm like, I hear that word and I'm like, it's no because someone's just saying because I said no,
Mhm.
and so for me, I'm like, that's a challenge at that point. I might as well get around it. So, anyways, kind of growing up, I was kind of never had a lot of relationships, but a couple longer relationships. I mean, for my age. I
Oh
met you
my
when I was
gosh.
23, right?
Yes.
I guess I went through a period of life where I was just kind of trying to figure stuff out. I dropped out of college really early. I think I got about a half semester in there. I learned how to play table tennis really well, but that's about it. Your dad still smokes me at it, so the college didn't really pay off there.
My dad's good at
But
table tennis.
um, but yeah, so I dropped out of college pretty quickly. Did the couch potato thing at my parents' place for a while, and then fell in love with working at Jets and realized that like it wasn't necessarily the money I was making at Jets, even though I thought it was a lot at the time, and I could work all I wanted as much as I wanted. And so it was like 78 hours a week. It was great. And then I was chasing money, as I feel like most young men do. um, I don't know about these days. I don't know if people really chase that much anymore, but
There's certain people that do.
I'm sure
I
there
think there
are.
are. Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, so I chased another dollar over to another dollar an hour over to a mom and pop's computer shop. Had a great like year there, 1 year. Learned a lot about that service and what could be improved upon. And once again, I was kind of pushing up against that young Zach that was like told no a lot. And when I tried to improve the business, it wasn't improving quick enough for me. And so I said I can do this better on my own.
Mhm.
Went back to Jets, got my night job and weekend job back, and just started scaling my own business. And so yeah, it was just I remember a lot of work, and I remember a lot of like time, I guess, alone, kind of like figuring out who I was and how I wanted to do things and getting direction together. And then I met you, and yeah, it's been a wild ride since then.
Yeah. I mean, when we met each other, and I know we've talked about this a million times, we were both working two jobs where you worked two jobs back to back, like every day. I worked at two jobs like every other day. So I was working like 6 days a week for, I don't know, the first 6 years of our
Hmm.
togetherness, 6 or 7 years. And you, I want to say after a couple years after we got married, you probably finally put Jets down for good. But I mean, that was a good 4 years into our relationship,
Yeah,
that you were working both jobs. So,
yeah,
um,
that was wild.
we were hustling.
Yeah, I
We
mean,
were like
like,
trying.
and kind of when our lives came together, like I didn't. I mean, I knew about because we discussed it, like the financial backgrounds and things like that. But once again, we didn't really know what those impacts were going to be. So, for instance, like I remember, like we went and we're applying for our first house, and I think this was like 2006.
Well, no,
No,
because we
no,
didn't meet to 2009. So we
yeah,
bought
no,
our
I'm
first house
sorry. Yeah.
in 2013.
Was it 13?
Yeah.
Oh my God, I just totally lied to somebody. I told them like, yeah, I'm like in 2009, 2010.
Yeah. So we met in 2009. We got married in 2011. We
Huh,
had a little condo that we had to write a letter to because we
yeah.
didn't have good credit. I forgot about that.
So
Um,
that's actually a good story. I want to stop there real quick.
yeah.
Is that like that's something I learned how to do because I had bad credit.
Hmm.
So even like before I had started my business before I met you, I learned that landlords that did credit checks, which is a good thing for landlords to do, could be manipulated, not in a bad way, but manipulated by writing a letter and explaining things and just being really upfront with them.
Hmm.
And I remember when I got my condo in Milford, it was like $900 a month, and I was like, "Hey, I can't remember what her landlord's name was, but she was super nice." I said, "Just to be upfront and honest with you, before you waste time on a credit report, I have terrible credit. It's
Yeah.
awful."
Yeah.
I'm like, "I've made all my car payments." I'm like, "This is, the second place that I've lived." I go, "I can give you a history of transactions and stuff like that." And I told her, "I'll give you 3 months in advance as the security deposit and to know that I'm going to pay my rent on time." And she was like, "Yeah, that sounds good. Just cut me the check and we're good to go." So I learned how to get around my credit situation
Yeah.
by kind of just being transparent with people.
Yeah, I think that's what we did for our first little condo
Yep.
too.
And that's where I
So,
learned that. I
we were
was
like,
like,
"Hey,
"Yep."
we're just starting out. Like, we both work two jobs. We pay our bills on time, but we had a rough start." So,
Yeah. And she was fine with it. I
yeah,
think her name was Lisa, I feel
I
like.
don't remember, but she was really cool.
Yeah,
Like,
she
we
was
were easy tenants for
yeah.
her,
Yeah.
so we didn't trash anything. So, but yeah, we got our first house in 2013.
Yeah. So like I remember the feeling of getting like turned down for I think we might have qualified for like $60,000 or something like that for a house in 2010 or I'm sorry, like when did we apply for the first house? Like 2011,
It
2012?
would probably been like 2012 is when we started like the application process,
Yeah.
like to get pre-approved and things.
And I mean,
So
try to find a mortgage lender that wants to deal with somebody that isn't going to make them any commission, right?
yeah,
Like nobody wants to deal with that. And
yeah.
I don't blame them. It was frustrating. Like, and I felt like, oh my God, we are never going to get out of this situation. This sucks. Like, I can't believe that I've been financially responsible for the past X amount of years of my life, and it's still following me around that I have this medical bill or something like that from when I was a kid.
I think what frustrated me was like we had at that point because of our savings from the wedding and what we had been saving since we'd been dating, like we had a good amount in our savings account and like nobody cared. And I was like, but look, we're making these payments to our savings account that
Mhm.
equal more than what the house payment is. Like you can't look at that. And they were like, no,
Yeah, and a lot of that was
sorry.
because I was self-employed, right? I had no
Yeah.
W-2 to show,
Yep.
and those
And
were
at that
different
time,
rules.
I also was self-employed at
Oh,
that
that's
time.
right.
Hmm.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
like there's different rules that we had to play by, um, because it is hard to qualify small business owners. Like, in I mean, we were small business
Yeah.
owners.
I think we had gotten like an FHA loan, which is already hard.
Yeah.
So it was like a government loan. It's already really hard. There's a lot more like checks and balances, but it ended up working out for the best. I mean, our first little house that had we had a bigger um amount to play with, we might not have even been looking at the houses that we were looking at,
Mhm.
right? And so the house that we ended up getting was a HUD home, which worked great with an FHA loan because those are the same, like they talk to each other really easily. So uh that was like one of our the best things we have done
Yeah.
is getting that little house
Yeah.
because we renovated it all cash because we had cash. We renovated it.
We
We didn't
couldn't
have
get a loan.
couldn't get a loan. We renovated it. And then when we sold like 4 years later, I mean, we like doubled
Yeah.
our
It was
money
it
because
was
it
awesome.
was a little foreclosure HUD home. It's the only thing we could afford, but it was like the best investment for us at that time.
Yeah.
But at that time, like you're bummed, right? Like when you're in it, when you're like trudging through it, it's hard to see like what's going to happen in the future. But yeah, had we have been looking higher, we might not have been able to afford
Mhm.
renovating and being able to make such a good flip on a property. And it worked out in our favor. So,
I
uh,
remember thinking like, "This sucks." I'm
yeah.
like, "This is not like what I thought this process would be like." I would thought it
Mhm.
would be, like my parents, like, "You picked the house in Milford, you have it built, it's everything you ever wanted, whatever." And I can't say that for them. I don't know if it's everything they ever wanted, but, it was a nice home. And I'm like, "This is a three-bedroom ranch, the basement smells like must." I'm like,
I loved our
"It's built in the
house.
'50s." I'm like, the walls are disastrous. It looked like the cabinets weren't even
We
I don't
fixed it.
I don't know how it passed HUD inspection.
Yeah, I mean, I think the
It
guy
shouldn't
never even
have.
noticed there was mold in the basement that
Or a
we ended up
crack in
having
the
to
window.
fix and yeah. I laughed the hardest that like the very first day we had the keys, no one, not our inspector, not the HUD inspector, not my realtor, nobody
Mhm.
noticed that the toilet didn't work. Like it was broken,
Yeah.
like the back like of it. What's it called? The not tub.
The tank.
The tank
Tank,
was
yeah.
like cracked and empty, and nobody have even looked at that. And like I
I
remember
forgot
you
about that.
going to Home Depot that first day, and it was like $800 worth of just like there was like I think they had kicked renters out of there, so there was like sticky stuff all over the walls,
Squatters or
and
something.
yeah, it was crazy. And later on and down the road, actually there was an issue because the old renters had poured like cement
Mm,
down the drains, and it busted open our cast iron, like his old 50s house, like
yeah, the cast
pipes.
iron piping under
And
the
we had a
house.
huge issue with that. So, but again, when you're going through all that, you're like literally just trying to get through it. You're just trying to get by. And honestly, like it felt overwhelming there. It felt sad that we couldn't get more
Mhm.
and that we had to work harder than all of our friends. It felt like such a bummer that we had all these renovations to do, but then, it ended up being one of the best investments we made. So,
Well, I think that like I remember specifically like you being really frustrated with certain things and me feeling really bad because you were frustrated and I couldn't do my part, you know what I mean,
yeah.
from what I thought. And it was literally like it was literally just like I think verbatim you had said something like what like why do we have to work so hard for this? It's not fair. And it's one of those things where it's like every day you wake up and there's another roadblock. Every day you wake up, there's another challenge. And it just feels like just pounding away at the same problem over
Yeah.
and over and over. And you're right. It feels like you're stuck. I mean, like from being told, like I was dragged into, like when I bought my first car, I was dragged in by the finance guy at a car dealership of all places that sells used
A
cars.
used car dealership
And he
nonetheless.
says, he goes, listen, kid, he's like, your credit's terrible. He's like, I'm going to sell you this car if you really want it, but let me tell you how this goes. You're at the highest interest rate possible in the state of Michigan, legally possible. He goes, you're paying for a Mazda what you should be paying for a Cadillac. He's like, fix your credit and come back and see me. And me being an idiot, you know, it's just like, "Yeah, give me the car, whatever, I can afford it."
Don't tell me no.
Right, exactly. But I mean, like, that was when I was a kid before I met you.
Mhm.
And then that problem carried through for the next 5 years to like after we were married. And I'm like, this sucks. Nobody will tell me yes. I've got a good job. I make good money. I've got a good business. I'm like, I've been stuck for 7 years, it felt like.
Yeah.
But if we think about it, we weren't really stuck.
Oh.
We'd saved more money than you and I had ever saved.
Mhm.
I've grown a business. I've learned a lot of different things, but there was just one area of the life that seemed to be stuck at that point.
Yeah. Um, Same thing. I remember vividly the day that I got, 'cause I always, because of the bankruptcy, I always like keep track of like my credit on like mycreditscore.com or whatever.
Mhm,
And I remember one day my credit had like popped up really high. And I mean, it was already good by that point, but it like jumped and I was like, what's going on? And I looked and my bankruptcy had been dissolved off my credit report and I like started sobbing.
mhm,
Like I remember calling you and I was like, this thing that has followed me around for 10 to 12 years is gone. We don't have to worry about that anymore.
mhm.
And sorry, it's getting me all emotional.
Yeah, it's all right.
It's like you don't have to worry about that anymore. And it's huge because it feels like forever. It feels like it's never going to go away.
Mhm,
But the fact that through that we got our first apartment, our first house, we built our savings. I feel like even before it fell off, we had already started saving like for our big like investment savings account.
mhm.
That kind of thing. I want to say we were living at home with my parents, waiting to buy this house when it did fall off.
That's right.
Because I remember being in my mom's kitchen randomly when that happened. And I was like, what? Like, this is crazy. So, it was really great timing for that to
Yeah.
happen. So, because I was like, for this house, we didn't have to write a letter, I don't think.
No, I don't think so.
So, uh, but yeah, it feels so hard when you're going through it, but it's like the hindsight, like you'll never know what the future is going to look like. Like it's like the hindsight's 2020, right? Like looking back, it's like, well, those things set us up for this. I say all the time to people, um, my first two, well, not my first two relationships, but my two really, really bad relationships that, they never wanted to work. They weren't good with money at all. I may have never, ever, ever appreciated how hard you work and how good you are with money and how we treat things. I might not have liked that had I not went through all that
Mhm,
stuff. I might have been like, why, what do you mean you're not coming home tonight and you're working all night? Like, you never know like how that could have transpired had I have not gone through something kind of hard. So, um, sometimes when you're just going through it and figuring out how to get by, what's the lesson? Like, what how are you growing through that? How are you pushing through that so that 10 years from that date you can go, oh man, it felt so grimy and it was hard, but because I did A, B, C, and D, now I'm here.
Mhm.
Like you can't just live in the grime.
Right. I think one of the things that you just described was with your ex-husband and then the following relationship after that. Um, you described the similarities,
Yeah.
right? And so I call that pattern recognition.
Mhm.
And a tool that I tend to use a lot and subconsciously forever ago, like I would recognize a pattern and make a change. And really that's what everybody talks about, coaches and things like that these days. Coaches, for me at least, in my experience, have been really good at recognizing patterns and then interjecting and disrupting that pattern. You did that with your former relationships.
Mhm.
I did that financially with myself. I even recognize patterns from like personal things and tendencies that I had that I was disrupting because they didn't work out. So if I do the same thing over and over and over, I hate that because everybody says it. It's insanity,
Yeah,
do the
yeah.
same thing and expect different results. Everybody knows that. However, but if you apply that to a pattern, like for instance, we talk about like my pattern of drinking, right?
Mm. Mhm.
Let's say 5, 6 nights a week, whatever. I can go to a given bar, have the same conversation with the same people at the same time, have the same drinks, same bartenders,
Same complaints.
same complaints. My story kind of stops,
Mhm.
right? Like I noticed that as a pattern and I'm like, what happens if we disrupt this pattern? Let's find out. So all of a sudden, I've taken this just trying to make it through. And let's say my just trying to make it through, like when I had a bad day, this is a great example. Had a bad day. I knew that I could go up to the local bar, see a couple of my friends from high school that I've known for forever. They're great human beings. And then also like have a few drinks in the house because I knew the bartender really well. It was a comfortable place to be. It was really easy. Right. And it would be great, and I'd leave at 2 in the morning and, or get a ride from Vena or get an Uber, whatever.
Love those
Uh,
phone calls. I will
yeah.
always take those phone calls, but man, you're like, I will come and get you.
Thank you for your patience. I appreciate it. But I noticed that pattern and what that action I was taking, what that was leading to. And what it would lead to is just trying to get by. And if that's what I'm doing every day, I got to disrupt that somehow because otherwise tomorrow's going to look just like today. I have the same problems, same complaints, same challenges, same place, same time, same drink. It just it didn't sound good to me. And so that's something that I like to do is evaluate what does my life look like right now? The goods, the bads, so the pros and the cons. What are the patterns that I have that I may not realize that I have? And how do I disrupt those just to see what happens?
Yeah, I think that's super interesting because, again, I think sometimes people just live in the character of what they're building for themselves. And um, I know that the climate out there is crazy and it is very hard right now. It's hard for a lot
Mhm.
of people. It's scary some days, Um, but like, yeah, what are you like? Are you just going to sit back and take it? Or are you going to change a pattern or change a habit or do something, even very minute, something little that can maybe, like you said, disrupt that flow to where a couple years down the line, you're like, man, 2025, that was a hard year, but man, I did do this that year. And I remember changing my thoughts. And I remember stopping hanging out with that person, or I remember going intentionally putting aside an extra $10 a week, or
Mhm.
whatever it may be, something really little that can compound to where a couple years later, you're not in that just getting by stage anymore. Or if you are, maybe there's a happiness, a more happiness behind it. It doesn't have to be a financial getting by. It can be any type of
Yeah.
getting by. There might be a joy you have that you didn't have, or a hobby that you found that makes the financial getting by feel lighter. So it just sometimes you just, yeah, gotta throw something in there to change it up a little bit.
I think that's the reason that people have a hard time getting started. And if you guys want like someone that talks really eloquently about this, Jesse Itzler talks about this really well.
Oh,
Is it's always easier to estimate what you're going to lose and impossible to estimate what you could gain.
mm,
And so there's this huge fear and huge unknown is that if I disrupt this pattern, what happens? And then it gets even uncomfortable when you disrupt the pattern once you decide to do that. And it makes it even easier to slide back into old habits, right? What did I talk about when I quit drinking locally here? I, I lost some of the people that I thought were closest friends of mine,
mhm.
right? And I still love those people to this day. And I just don't see them anymore. They don't call, we don't talk. It's just, it's interesting. Um, and so that got really difficult because like my social group, my community that I was what are we calling this? That I was just getting by with was no longer my community because I wasn't part of theirs. I didn't abide by their patterns. And so I just didn't fit anymore. And it made it really difficult for a period of time for me to continue what I was doing instead of slipping back into that pattern. So by no means am I saying this is going to be comfortable or fun or super exciting, but you also don't know what's on the other side, right? So I don't know. It's just so hard to like I hear that a lot is like, man, I'm just trying to get by. I'm just struggling through, or it's another day. And there's something I thought about the other the other day with this was like there's a statement of like, this is my life, right? And it can be taken in two different ways, and it's how you say it, right?
Mhm.
Is this is my life. I get to decide, or this is my life.
Mm.
And it's two completely different meanings. And something that we've been successful at, and not that we haven't had those moments where I'm like you said, you kind of broke down and we're like, why do we have to work so hard for this? And I might have
Yeah.
responded with, this is our life, babe. Like we're just gonna have to work like this for forever. We're gonna have to work harder. It's just doesn't come easy to us. And this it sucks. But instead, we said, this is our life. So let's grab control. What can we do? What are the patterns that we have? What are the obstacles? Let's move through. And it wasn't like that huge, clear, concise, like we had a meeting about it and 5-year vision board or anything like that. But
We
we
weren't
saw,
doing that back then.
no, definitely
Maybe
not.
now.
Yeah. But like we saw some patterns that we had to clean up and adjust. Some advisors, aka mortgage people,
Mhm.
for the mortgage instance, advised us to do certain things to clean up our credit, and we made it through. Right? We took charge of the situation instead of just going, "Well, this is life. This is our life," or just getting by. It's like, and it's okay to have those feelings every once in a while, but realizing how you're saying that and what you can take control over and what you're willing to do about it, which I think is a huge thing. Like you've got to be willing to make a change and willing to be uncomfortable. But
Willing to make sacrifices. Like you said, you sacrificed friends. Like,
yeah.
we had to sacrifice early in our marriage. Like, we didn't go do a ton. We weren't traveling the way we travel now. Like
Mhm.
we were like, okay, we do have to save because we do want to try to get this house or, sacrificing the fact that we both had to work two jobs. That was hard. Like we were hustling. Like it was a lot. It was stress. It was busy. We were tired.
Mhm.
So we had to make sacrifices. And I think sometimes that's hard for people to go, okay, well, I want a different life and I don't want to just get by, but I also don't want to give up sitting at the bar every night with my friends. I don't want to give
Yeah.
up
It's
not buying cocktails so I can save that $30 bar tab.
yeah.
I don't want to not eat the good food. I don't want to make that sacrifice. So you have to be willing to do stuff. And so to piggyback off the insanity, like, doing the same thing every day. I always feel like too, like the nothing changes if nothing changes,
Yeah.
that old verbiage. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, you cannot expect to have something different and get through and push through that wall if you don't change anything.
Yeah.
in your life.
I think that like you were saying, like I always go like if I so many people want change in their life and want something different, but they wait for the world to change around them to conform to what they want it to be. And I don't know if I just learned this early on in life, but the world wasn't going to change for me because they felt bad for me or because they saw me struggling. I had to change to get the things that I wanted. So because my credit was bad, yeah, I could have just said, "Well, man, this is life. This sucks," and kept on doing the same thing and being told by landlords, "No, you can't rent this place because your credit sucks." Instead, I said, "I have to change what I'm doing, and I'm going to contact this person and explain the situation to them and see if that changes anything." And oh my god, it did. I actually had that success in that 3 times. I had it once with a roommate before I met you, and then I had it by myself, and then it worked with you. So like I had to change the I wasn't going to wait for the world to change around me because it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I think a lot of times um we can only control what we do. We can't control what everybody else does. So if you're sitting there waiting for your husband to change, the banker to change their mind, the boss to finally realize that you're cut out for a position instead of asking them or switching jobs, if you're constantly just waiting for other people, like that's not going to happen. You are the only person that you have control of. So
Yep.
you have to make those decisions.
Yeah.
So,
And I mean, to your point at work, like you might be doing a fantastic job at work and your boss may not be recognizing it. And like, I'm not saying go out and change everything, but if you want that promotion, maybe you start doing a little extra. Like, like I have a major problem with people that want to complain about work or complain about their jobs or their situation in general. And my first question to a lot of these people, and people probably don't like me because of this, so I try to be choosy on who I say it to, but it always crosses my mind. What are you doing to fix the problem? And I asked someone that once at our house. "W- Wow, that sounds like a major problem, and it sounds like you're passionate about that and you want change. Like, what did you recommend for the solution?" And the response that I got was, "Oh, that's not my job."
it's not my job. That's out of
And
my pay grade.
I
It's not my
I
job.
almost lost my mind
Yeah.
because I'm like, "Why are you sitting at my house complaining? You're sucking up the air out of this entire conversation, out of this entire room to complain about something you're not even willing to do anything about, so it must not be that big of a priority to you."
Yeah.
Like, it drives me insane.
I think that person still complains about their job every
I,
time. But
quit.
again, that's the problem, right? Like that person would be like, "Oh, my job, my job, my job," and it's like, okay, yeah, then I guess that's going to be your reality.
Mhm.
I wouldn't want that reality. If I'm not happy with something, I'm going to make a change, and that is why we have the things that we have now. That is why we've put ourselves in situations because we're brave enough to have those conversations, or even if we're not, I don't want to say brave enough, but sometimes you just got to like even ask your boss, "Hey, what would I need to do to get a promotion?" Like you don't even have to ask for the promotion. Just
Mhm.
ask like what would be the steps that I would need to take? Like, I think sometimes just fear holds us back so much from doing anything or staying just so in a place.
Do you know how
You
many times
know?
like I've heard that being presented, and then when they don't get the promotion, it's, "Oh, my boss didn't like me," or my coworkers threw me under the bus," or this or that. Like there's excuse after excuse after excuse. No, it could just flat out be that you didn't do enough.
Yeah. I mean, also could flat out be that like sometimes just like I want to say like biblically, sometimes the answer doesn't always get to be yes. Sometimes the answer is also no. Sometimes the boss might not have the budget for it, or it's not time, or they're not looking to promote anybody right now. But if you do these steps, maybe down the road that might show up. So, like, sometimes the answer is just no. And then you're like,
Mhm.
okay, at least now I know that and I can move on or figure out how to be happy and content in this position.
You know,
But
you know what? Like, I guess like if, as we're talking about that, like a follow up to that is like, okay, so let's say you did hypothetically get screwed. The boss picked someone they liked more than you, or whatever the situation is, right?
Yeah.
The boss hired their niece to take the role, and blah blah blah, and whatever happened, you can let that be the end of the story, or that story just keeps on continuing. That pattern keeps on happening.
Yeah.
Or you can say, if that's really the case and that's really the situation, do I want to work at a place that does this, where I'm treated like this, where I did everything that was asked of me and I wasn't guaranteed my reward, or I didn't receive the reward or promise that I was made to me.
Mhm.
I know I wouldn't stay in a relationship like that. I wouldn't stay in a business like that. I wouldn't stay at a job like that. If I'm not given what I was told that I would be given, and that's I say
Mhm.
that very intentionally, um, because a lot of times there's not clarity around that. Like you said, these are things you have to do to get a promotion. That doesn't mean you're guaranteed a promotion.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like, I'll give you this example. I have this relationship that I just had for we've had this relationship for 15 years, and I've bent over backwards for this client.
Mhm.
And it's not like standing on the mountaintop going, "Look at all the things I've done for you." However, this client pulled me into their office one day, had me come out to their office for it for about 45-minute drive, said, "What, look at this invoice." And I'm looking at it going, "Yeah, I spent this time on this, did this." And he goes, "I recognize you spent the time and I recognize you did the work." And he goes, "I don't want to pay it." And he ripped it up in front of me.
Oh,
And
it's just
our
not a
agree
good look.
our agreement has always been, I spend my time on this. I work really hard for you. I get things done. That's what you hire me for. I get things done.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you decide to go back on what our agreement was. I terminated that relationship.
That's that old, like, when people show you who they are, believe them. And that person showed you who they were,
Yeah.
and you were like, believe in it. I'm believing you.
Yep.
Like,
And he was,
immediately.
when I went into his office 2 weeks later, because I thought about it
Mhm.
and just said, "Look, I think it's time that we part ways." It looked like I punched him in the nose. I've
Yeah.
never seen the guy so disappointed in my life. I was shocked.
Mhm.
I was like, "What do you think was going to happen?" You know what I mean? I'm like,
Yeah.
"You promised me something. I promised you something. I delivered. You didn't. You taught me," and I said this to him, "You taught me how to operate in business. So this is your fault." I didn't say that
Well, it
part.
is also kind of true. So,
But yeah, I just like, it's the I could have sat back and complained about it and just said, "Man, another loss,
mhm.
another day. I'm getting beat up. I'm tired of getting beat up." But instead, I took control of the situation and said, "That's not going to happen to me anymore."
Yeah.
So like, it's what you do with it. It's how you receive it and how you react. And I don't know. I just don't get the. I understand and empathize with the "this sucks"
Mhm.
mentality. Like, I
100%.
get it. But if it sucks every day and you're doing the same thing every day, what can you do different, you know?
I don't know if it was like a book or a podcast. So if somebody knows what this could have been from, please leave it in the comments or something. But um like give yourself a day, like something like that happens. Give yourself a day to like grieve, to mourn, to have a little bit of a pity party, to waller in your sadness. Move on. You wake up the next day, that's done. That little pity party's over. Like move through it because that is like a cancer. It'll eat you up if you keep like dwelling on that constantly. Like you have to, yes, give it that moment of grief and like heartbreak. Like I'm sure when that happened to you with somebody ripping up a check, that was hurtful. And it's okay to be hurt by something like that. It's okay to be saddened and disappointed in somebody treating you like that, but you cannot stay in that mindset. Like it just isn't going to help you at all. So I always like that. Like give yourself a day, let it let it be and then just move on. So,
Yeah, I think that, like, for me, because that was a 15-year relationship, I took a couple weeks.
yeah.
I kind of knew what was going to be done, but I took a couple weeks because I wanted to make sure I wasn't making an emotional decision.
Mhm.
Because if you like, I just had a conversation about this with a colleague. Is like, if you roll with me, I'm like attached to you. Like your business becomes my business. And I take it that seriously. And so it does bother me if we're treated like that. It's because I've emotionally invested into your company, probably I don't want to say just as much because that takes credit away from the owners, but like that's our commitment level. And
Mhm.
so when you just blindside me like that, like that's I'll have a little bit of an emotional reaction,
Yeah.
and then I need to make sure I'm making a clear decision. So that wait a day concept, wait however much time you need, but
Yeah.
get action rolling,
Yeah.
because
Just don't settle in that feeling
yeah,
for a long time because that is not good for anything. That's where you get stuck. That's where that
right,
starts to becoming your story, and you don't want that to happen. So
yeah, yeah,
but yeah, so hopefully this landed with someone out there. Just, a little background on who we are and what we've kind of come through and the times in our life where we felt we were just digging on our heels to try to get by. But in the future, how that served us and the lessons we learned and what we took with us from those lessons. So
yeah.
yeah.
Hopefully, you guys find it useful, and it's one of those ones that you could probably listen to again if you feel like you get stuck in the future.
Yeah, definitely save this one. Subscribe. If you follow us on YouTube, like and subscribe to our channel and
Yeah,
to us there.
I always
Um,
forget we have a YouTube channel now.
we do have a YouTube channel. Leave us a comment if
Yeah,
anything, kind of struck a nerve or you didn't agree with something, or if you did, we would love to hear your thoughts on this episode. So we really appreciate you listening wherever you listen to your podcast, and we appreciate you watching.
yeah. See you guys next week.
See you next week.